you say, well, what motivates you and what gets you going, it's the satisfaction of helping specifically the youth. But if I could help anyone in my messaging or if I drop a seed, and that's the reason why I call my company Hayward Forward.
All right, welcome to another edition of the Journey of Freedom podcast. And Brian, Dr. B, your host today. And it has been such an exciting week. We've been able to talk about business. We've been able to talk about entrepreneurship. We've been able to really drill down into, ideas that Black men can take as they're moving forward in this journey to freedom. When we think about what freedom means and what it means to be independent and be able to do things on your own, it's different for all of us. But the key is that we have community, that we have relationships, that we have people that we can go to when things aren't going good, and people that we can go to when things are going good, when things are going great, and we want to experience this community together. And today, I think you are in for a treat. I usually say that I'm so excited because I am, but the treat today is Julian Hayward. And the things that he's been able to do in our community, the things that he's thinking about doing, the business that he started as an entrepreneur. Yesterday, when we talked to Evan yesterday, we talked about him working in the paint store and getting all the things that he needed to do in order to be able to launch his own paint business. And then when I think about, Julian today and his ability to, work at Kaiser as an executive and learn some of the skills that helped him launch his business. And I'm not saying that everybody here needs to be an entrepreneur and everybody else here needs to have their own business, but you need to have that opportunity. If that's something that you want to pursue, if that's something that you want to do, we want to make sure that you have all the resources necessary to be able to grow and expand. And taking all the lessons that we've learned from our past and then being able to apply them to our futures. And so, Julian, I'm so excited for you to be on today. I'm excited that you are here to talk to a group of men, hopefully not just men, other folks that are willing to listen to our show about the excellence that is part of. We're going to interview 100 Black men this year that are being successful. They're successful in their own right. I know success means, and we'll probably talk about that later, you and I, just about what success means to you. But what I see is people that have the ability to move forward and that can be in examples, that can show a pathway of things that happen. And Julian was and I'll let him tell his story, but I know he was a student athlete. As was I, and we were I was back in the 80s when I was doing it. He was in the 90s when he was an athlete. And there's some opportunities that are there today that weren't there for us when we were going through it. And so he has actually created and crafted a business around some of those opportunities that are available. So Julian, again, I said, thank you for being on. I'm going to let you start with your story, start wherever you want in the history, and then we'll just move forward from that.
Okay, well, I appreciate it, Brian. I'm glad to be here. And usually when I start in college.
Okay.
College was one of my best times of my life. And it's also freedom for, as a student, you finish high school and then you're off on your own. So I had the opportunity to, and I had the privilege to be on a team playing football and getting a scholarship from Dallas. So I grew up in Dallas, got a scholarship at the University of Colorado and played football for 4 years. And I had the opportunity to play on a national championship team. That year, I got so many stories, but that year I didn't even really get to play. So that was, and what I realized in reflection on my experience as being a student athlete is the mental and life skills that I had to develop and go through, and realizing now in hindsight that I really didn't have an advocate for me to really lean on. You could argue that I had my parents, but, I think that's the conversation we're going to have, coming from a Black family and the culture of, I think, being a minority. It sort of there's a lot of positives that come out of it, but there's a lot of challenges and stigmas that come out of it that you carry on to your life. And if you don't have anybody to sort of uncover that, what'll happen is you keep those hidden based on your ego and for me being a male, it makes it even more challenging because now I'm holding on to those things consistently. So that's why, you transition as I went through that. There's a lot of stories involved in my 4-year college experience, but fast forwarding into now, it's helped me to create and think about how to be an entrepreneur and start my own business. And I'll go back and say this, Brian, is that when I was brought up, there was no talk of me being able to start my own business. In my culture, it was you're going to work for someone. So when you get that message all your life, you don't think that there's anything else to do. I'm gonna go work for Ford. I'm gonna go work for Shell. That's what you're told to get a degree and go work for someone. And I think surrounding yourself with the right people and having the right mindset helps you to change your differences. So I think that that's a key thing too, is that, as a Black male, if you're open to receive different opportunities or receive different thoughts on how people manage their life, then that can open up the doors for you. So that's what I was doing. I'm a people person. I'm a people pleaser, but I'm able to come into conversations with an open mind to be able to know that there's something I'm going to learn, and there may be also a relationship that I can build. So the company that I started, obviously you know that I work for Kaiser as well, so I'm doing double duty, is Hayward Forward. And it was inspired by not only my plight, but also my daughter, who's a student athlete at the University of Colorado. She plays soccer, and understanding as she's going through, she's a sophomore, that there's so many challenges. And even though the college says that they have all these resources in place, I look at it as having a Corvette, and you open it up, it looks nice on the outside, and you're saying, oh man, this runs well, but you open it up and there's no engine. That means, and when you look at it from that perspective, they have the resources, but what makes or helps someone to actually utilize those resources? So what I put together, and I mentioned to you this before, is a company. It is for profit, and I'm looking at making a nonprofit arm or partnering with a nonprofit. I call it three prong. It is NIL. I won't go deep into it, which is name, image, and likeness. So if you're not in the sports realm, you may not understand what that is, but it's basically an opportunity for athletes to build a brand or build a business around themselves, so they can now make money off of their image. And that started, I think, 2.5 years ago. And before you couldn't. So in my world back in the day, if I had, they were selling my T-shirt at Dick's Sporting Goods, I get nothing for that. Now they can't do that. Or if they do that, they need my permission, and I can get a percentage of those sales. So that's name, image. So I'm in the process of looking at the athletes that are more, I call them the have-nots, the athletes that aren't getting notarized as much. Maybe they play a sport that doesn't get that much exposure, so they're not getting the attention like the Shedeur Sanders or some of Caitlin Clark, some of the people that you hear that are getting all these deals. And I'm connecting them with middle organizations, team organizations, small to medium businesses, so they have an opportunity to brand themselves by partnering with a business, which then they also help the business market their product and services. So there's speaking engagements that's involved, coaching engagements that's involved, and also just marketing who they are with the business. So that's what I do there. That's the first piece. The other piece is being an advocate for them for mental health and life skills. So every week I try to give them an affirmation, but I'm actually helping them brand themselves and having conversations around that next step in life. What are you going to do after college? Do you know how to have a conversation with the CEO? Do you have the opportunity to ask the right questions? So if I get you a NIL deal, do you ask the right questions to me to understand who your audience is going to be, how you need to dress, those type of things? And then the other piece is, if you say, well, how does Hayward Forward bring in revenue? it's creating content. So I'm in the business of creating content. So helping the student athlete create content. But when I approach the businesses, it's having a conversation and creating a market campaign on what their needs are by introducing them a student athlete that can help them. So we do all that content. I have a videographer, and I also incentivize the athletes to help as well. It's almost like an internship. So I'm asking them if they have raw data that they're doing, or if they want to do a day in the life of a student athlete, I tell them I'm going to be NIL and I'll pay you and I'll take your content, we'll brand it, and then we'll post it on social media. So the social media is the way that we're helping to promote, to get more exposure. So
Okay.
not to pat myself on that, but not to give myself a plug. But if there is, businesses that are saying, hey, I would love to get more exposure, and I'm a startup or I'm a medium-sized business, I would look for an opportunity. That's what we do. So that's the business in a nutshell. And the first year was all about exposure, Brian, but now that people are seeing the content and seeing the videos, and I'm still in a place where I'm trying to make sure that my social media is up to par. That's still in the works, but now I'm getting people reaching out to Hayward Forward, asking for the services that we have, that we can provide, and specifically asking for the student athletes. So that's why it's a win-win, because now the student athletes are in a position to be able to get in front of businesses, but also more importantly, and this is the direction I would love to go a little bit more, is get in front of these, the community, to be able to speak about your plight. And you can remove the athlete piece somewhat, because that's just a portion of what they do. So it's really being a student and how they navigate their life from high school, that process. And I know that there's a lot of elementary, middle school, high schoolers that could take advantage of understanding what it means to be a student/athlete. So that's it in a nutshell.
Wow, I love that. And it just opens up so many different worlds as I'm thinking of, the things that you're able to do, and the kids that these athletes might be able to reach that may have never been able to reach, some of the kids that are in the likeness. And I think of, I even think about our community, and, like the podcast I did yesterday with a entrepreneur businessman that's in our area, being able to support maybe an athlete or
Right.
to be able to have that, and to be able to make that mix. Like when you and I were athletes, I can remember, I was a track athlete, and I was able to go to Europe, but I, was during, the amateur athletic association wise in college, and, any money that I made, was all secretive, and it was all, you can't make any money. You can't do anything.
Right.
Christian Okoye, who played for the Kansas City Chiefs, well, he was my roommate.
Okay.
In college. And so, all the things that he did in college before he got to the NFL, you think of all the things that could have happened that would have made his life better. What I really want, if I can just jump into identity, and maybe we'll jump back just a little bit. And, as you were, now you were an athlete that was able to go to college and then be part of a national championship team. And how did that shape your identity and your belief in what you were capable of doing? Because I know you talked about, you were kind of the belief system in you was this: I'm going to go work from somebody. And then I don't know, was it that I'm going to work up the corporate ladder? Did you think there was opportunities to be, the president or vice president, or what was it in you? I know things have changed, but as your identity coming right out of college or right in that spot, what kind of shape that? Was it people? Was it opportunities? What helped you?
Yeah, and I want to say that when you say identity, it brings up a lot of things, because a lot of times I think people, they don't know who they are. And I think that's why I could tell you, I don't even know if I really knew who I was. I knew I graduated college, but I didn't really have an identity. And I think if you were to ask me and push me on it, I would say my identity was playing on the national championship team. And I think if you don't understand that there's more substance about character of a person. And I think that that's where the identity starts coming in. And if no one teaches and tells you that, then you're looking and searching for an identity that may not be even you. So you need to understand and fix yourself first. And I didn't do that. So to your answer, when I came out, I don't think I had an identity. I think I was just walking around hoping to, and this is where I would tell some of the students or athletes is, surround yourself with the right people, because, you're almost a direct reflection on I forget what my grandmother had said, something about the closest 5 people that you surround yourself with, that's who you will become. So if you're around knuckleheads and people that aren't motivated, guess what? You're probably that's going to rub off on you. Wow. But if you have the right people, which, and you can start talking about faith too a little bit, that sort of brings on where if you have that, your identity starts creating itself, because now you're not focused on other people and other things. You're focused on that faith, or if you believe in, I do believe in God and I believe in Christ because I was born in that world. But I think a lot of people, even if you don't believe, they're trying to fill that void. You have that void and you're filling it with all sorts of craziness, whether it's, you're eating too much, you're gambling, or if it's sex, or if it's, your money, all this other stuff. And I think that if you take a step back and understand who you are and you're confident in that, and there's a lot of elements that make that up, then I think that that's when you can create your identity of who you are. And now fast forward, and you ask me now, what's your identity? And I feel like I identify with my faith. I identify with my close friends that are around me. And I like to use the example of, not to get biblical, but, I use examples of, Christ with the disciples. You surround yourself with the right people, and they can hit you with your the things that you might not do well. Yeah. And so I think that's it in a nutshell for me is, I identify with my faith, and I identify with, I love sports, so I do identify that, but I identify with helping people. If you say, well, what motivates you and what gets you going, it's the satisfaction of helping specifically the youth. But if I can help anyone in my messaging, or if I drop a seed, and that's the reason why I call my company Hayward Forward, because it's a play on pay it forward. Sometimes you do something, you don't look for anything in return, and you just move on, because you may say something that someone will take on, and you may not ever realize that you're making a difference. But that's where I would want to identify with being that type of person, someone that gives back, but not necessarily is looking for a handout or looking for something in return. We all have something that's in it for us, but that's what motivates me, and that's my identity.
I love it. I love it. And to think of how important identity is, and how important it is that we continue to grow and continue to work on ourselves and continue to move forward. Because you're right, your grandma was right. The 5, 6, 10 people that we hang around most are probably within your same income bracket, already in your same thought process, same in your political views, and same in. And so we got to be really careful to guard that. If I want to move forward, then I got to find associations that are, forward in the direction that I think I want to go. If I find myself falling backward, probably the first thing I can check is, well, who are my associations? Who am I hanging around? Yes. Who is feeding into my mind? One of the things that I'd love to unpack with you, because it's based on something you said a couple of times already, and we kind of talk about money or finances, and and what it takes to build. And one of the things that I think that I hear a lot in our community is, and believe me, I've worked in nonprofits. I've ran nonprofit organizations before. I'm an entrepreneur on that side of it. But sometimes we feel like unless we are, once we've hit this certain amount, once we're giving back, it's important that we give back, which I think it's 1,000% important that we give back. But running a nonprofit versus a for-profit business. And sometimes I think, a lot of us, as I have these conversations, they say, well, I need to run a nonprofit, which is one of the things that you said, or have a nonprofit arm. And my question I love to ask, how are you coming to that? Why is it not okay just to have a for-profit and be able to give back to the community, but still run a nonprofit? Because I kind of want to know what your thought process, and I know there's other people here who would love to see that. Like, what drives you to say, okay, I want one of my arms to be nonprofit because that's probably a great way to give back or to get money to come in, versus, hey, I run this great profit, it makes a ton of money, and then we just give back that way. Have you thought through that process or thought about that at all?
Well, you've brought a good point up, because I've struggled with that and trying to figure out how to do that. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. And for me, it's also putting the ego aside and saying that, I don't really know what I don't know in that process. So that's the reason why I know internally, without even thinking about it, I know that I want to give back in some way. So that's the reason why, again, if you're connected with, I've got 5 or 6 close friends that I'll talk to, and asking them, that I get different answers. Okay. And, and some is like, no, you should just go for profit. And some like, well, they hear everything I'm doing. It's like, well, why don't you do nonprofit? So I get torn. But I feel, and it's interesting that you said the thing about, well, even if you're for profit, you can still give back. And I don't know if I've really thought of it from that perspective, because I'm thinking I should do it from I need to have a nonprofit that I'm associated with. And the reason, part of it is I want to be able to teach that part of philanthropy and giving in my program to the kids, because even I had one athlete that I was speaking to, and actually they went to Cherry Creek as well. And I said, what would be cool is that if you got a name, image, likeness deal, is that you would think about if you were to take that money and maybe giving half of the earnings that you get back to the community or back to a nonprofit. And his answer was, I never thought about that. Maybe I should. So part of it is also learning at an early stage. And I'll tell you from, obviously, being brought up in the church, and I'll tell you that was off and on, because sometimes we were going to church constantly and sometimes we weren't going at all, but I know that there was a giving component. That's the only time that I really understand and learned about giving, but I wasn't actively understanding the philanthropy piece of it. So that's why I'm fairly new with understanding. If you ask me about nonprofits and how they work, I'm on the low end on that. I've tried to educate myself and talk to some people, but I know enough to be dangerous, but there's still that piece of it. So I think even what you're hitting on is the foundation of, when you start looking at it from where we are, is different than looking at it from where we came from. Because I'll tell you right now, I wasn't taught about money. I had no idea about taxes. I had no idea how to make money other than, going to, I worked at Steak and Ale, getting a check and being shocked that, the government was taking money out of it and just, getting a tax return. That's it. That I didn't know anything. So, you would argue that, well, you went to college. How did you not? It's like, whether I was not paying attention or they weren't talking specifically on the day-to-day life of how money makes money and all those categories. And I'll just say financial literacy, didn't have it. So now I'm having to, it's almost like when you talk about our country and, some people don't believe that there's races that have privilege. And, I would argue that, no, there's people that have head starts.
Oh, absolutely.
And it starts with the generation. And all you have to do is look at, and we talked about this last night at a barbershop talk, is the generational curse. And that's how my grandmother used to say it, and my mom picked up on it too. But it's basically, I'm literally 2 generations from two generations from my grandmother, basically being I don't know what the right term is nowadays, but a housekeeper. I don't know what they called it, but part of like in Mississippi in a mansion or on a plantation, and if you talk to our white population, they're talking differently. I have a white buddy of mine that he talks about money and he's talking, and I'm like, I had to stop him because he said, oh yeah, well, my grandfather owned this store and, he had all this money and we had a car, and he's saying great grandfather. And I had to stop him and basically say, my great-grandfather was a slave.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a difference in the approach. So that's when it's eye-opening even to the other side, when then they can, especially when they don't think there's privilege, it's like, that's where it starts. So it's not, and they hear it as an excuse. And I'm saying it's not an excuse, it's a reality. So it's not that we're saying it and don't want to make it better. We just want you to have empathy, understand it, and then help us to understand how we can make it better. We don't necessarily want handouts, that's for sure, because handouts over time hurts us. But in the short term, though, we have to do something to help us get to the same starting spot that you guys already have the advantage of. And that's why I love those conversations. I get in those conversations all the time, Brian. And the key, though, is that I'm not speaking to be right. I'm speaking to understand other people's perspective. And then hopefully if I have an opportunity to speak, that you can understand it from my perspective of what I went through. And then just because I'm Black doesn't mean it's the same plight of every Black person in America.
And you can't speak for us all, right?
Yes. And that's a tricky one, because you want to have the right leaders in place, but my plight is different. So that's why I think us coming together is a big deal, because now we have, it's almost like a spectrum. It's almost like giving the example of in the Olympics when a diver dives and you get a score. Guess what they do? They throw out the low-end score and they throw out the high-end score.
Yeah.
So you got those extremes, but if we come together, we can make it more where I always say stay in the middle, where we have more of a portfolio. It may not all be the same, but we can all relate and give our examples and our experiences that can impact the youth. I know I went on a tangent a little bit, but it's still, that's where I always go back to foundation of everything that, all the questions, the pillars that you have that we talk about. It all starts with that foundation. And if you don't have a mentor, someone to look up to tell you or speak to you about those things, you're bound to go in a bad direction just based on how our culture is set up, specifically our Black culture. And it's not that it's negative or positive, it's just how it's set up. And we have to have people that can be an advocate to speak to the things in a positive way, not reflecting and staying in the rut of the negative, but overcoming that, addressing it, and we can speak to it, but knowing that there's a better way and there's different ways that we can get to the finish line.
Absolutely. And you think, there are systems that are in place now and that have been in place over history. And we look at, if you look at the history of our country, it hasn't been the greatest place for Black men in the last 400 years. I mean, that is a true fact. But it's where we go from here, and how do we redesign some of these systems? How do we come together? Yesterday I was on a conference call, and we were talking about, the program, my universe here, Journey to Freedom, and they were asking, it was a young Black woman who was asking, well, freedom sounds like there's an addiction. And I said, freedom isn't it wasn't, you have an addiction, so why are you using that word? Because you're trying to come out. I said, no, this is what has been part of who we are. This is how do we move that? You talked about your grandfather being a slave. Like, my grandma grew up on a reservation on one side of my family where, they were part of, a reservation in Oklahoma. And then, on my grandfather's side, we can trace that back to slavery in Kentucky, And so, those differences and those changes that happen are part of who we are, but not part of where we need to be and where we need to grow to and the things that we're able to accomplish. And so when I was asking you about the nonprofit, because I think whether it's the church, which I definitely want to talk about faith, that give us this mindset about money, right? Mm-hmm. About how do we use money? How is money supposed to be used? And, sometimes I think there's some limiting beliefs that are part of our upbringing that says, okay, what if I make a lot of money, somehow that's wrong, right? Because somehow in the Bible, you're supposed to, give all your money to the poor and kind of live this meek life. But then I think of all the opportunities that our counterparts, you even kind of talked about your white friends who had cars and had all these things and now are able to give back in a way that maybe a lot of us aren't able to at this point because we didn't have that same mindset. I have this It's called the Spirit-Filled Pocket Bible, and it's pretty thick of all the scriptures that have to do with money in the Bible. It is pretty important, because we spend most of our lifetime trying to make it, or a lot of our lifetime, trying to grow it. Most of our time, 40, 80 hours a week, utilizing it because it's a tool. Money isn't everything, but it's one of those tools that allows us to be able to do some of the things. And, as I was thinking about, the nonprofits that I've been part of, and, I was in homeless services, and I ran a homeless services organization. And then I look at the Denver metro area, and there's 54 organizations that are part of this nonprofit world. Mm-hmm. And out of those 54 organizations, they all are, primarily doing pretty much the same thing, all vying for this amount of money that now gets spread out all over the place. And then you get to do a little bit for a little bit of people,
right?
Because everybody's vying for the same amount of money, and thinking of your business and the Hayward Forward business, and saying, what could when I think of the big long term, what could Hayward Forward do, for all the kids and all the athletes and all the things that, if we just have the mindset of understanding all these different programs and all these different opportunities,
right? And
then be able to say, okay, this is how Hayward's going to give back.
Right.
So how do we continue to open our minds, and how do we continue to do that? When we're doing it, and that shapes to the identity, right? And so,
yes,
if I pivot over to one of our pillars is trust, and I want to know how did you build trust for people to trust you, and then how did you were able over the years, as you moved up as an executive and then opened up a business, trust others that they're going to do right by you and not take advantage of you? Because I think that's another thing that we struggle with as Black men is, who do I trust? Sometimes we don't even trust each other. Sometimes we don't trust people to do it. So how did you walk yourself through that?
Well, there's a couple of things, and one is having discernment when you're talking to people. So I think that over time is about just experience when you talk to people. Okay. And understanding, listening to keywords, listening to body language. And so some of that can be learned, but some of it is also a gift to be able to, speaking, and also being authentic and being okay with, being uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking to people, they can see that authenticity. But I think you also, the two things, well, I shouldn't say two, but the things is making sure that, your word is bond. So communicating. So if you say something, you fulfill that. And even if you miss it by a few minutes or so, that you're following up. So follow up is huge. And being able to communicate, I think is huge in building that building that trust. And I think also once you build that credibility, then people start trusting you. And that's why even when you have your own business, trust is going to be the key. So you got to put your best foot forward. So trust is, responsiveness. So when you respond to people, when you're getting information, I think that builds up that trust level as well. Mm-hmm. But if you can't, and a key, you said something too, but if you feel like you can't even, you got to trust yourself as well. And part of trusting yourself is to be disciplined. So if you can't trust yourself, how can you trust other people? So I think that's huge. So trusting yourself is maybe getting on a cadence of doing certain things. So if you say, I'm gonna wake up every morning and I'm gonna go work out at 6 a.m. and so if you get that regimen going, now you're trusting yourself. Now you can use that, and now you sort of have that experience. So now when you talk to people and you hear certain keywords that they're saying, and some of those keywords could be, I do this every morning, and I make sure that I call my mom, I respond to this person. You start hearing that, that's what starts building that trust. Now, obviously, relationships over time build trust. So if you know someone for a long period of time, but you still have to go to that foundation of, well, tell me when you first met them, how long did it take you to trust them? So then you have to take a step back and think about, why would I trust someone? And I just gave you some of the things is communication, responsiveness. And then it's just, it's my experience of knowing what a trustworthy person entails. And I gave you some of those things that I look for in a person.
Which is huge. And when you start thinking about trust, and it's all about relationships, right? Because what else do you need to trust? You trust that your car is going to start, but that's a whole different matter of trust, right? We're talking about trust within our ability to move forward, and that's all about relationships. How important are the relationships that are in your life, whether it's spouses or kids or people? What do you do to, I guess, nourish and cultivate and create relationships that are going to serve you versus getting rid of relationships that don't? How do you balance that, and how do you find those?
So I am if you put it all, relationships are huge. Relationships are almost, you could have a debate whether, if you're in business, people will say that, well, you need money. If you don't make money in your business or generate revenue, you're going to go out of business. But I think a part of that is when you build your business, relationships are important, especially in my field in regards to having that credibility and being able to build relationships and maintain those relationships. But in general, you have to have a game plan. And I feel like, when you build a relationship, it should come natural. But there are also some things that you can do if you're an introvert and you feel like you're not a people person, that you can work on to build those relationships. Some of it's through that trust perspective. But, I've got a personal program that I do I basically call it, I've named it Fab 5 Friday. So I take my phone and I basically try to reach out to 5 different people that are in my phone that I haven't spoken to in at least 3 weeks. Sometimes it goes into 7, 8 months I haven't spoken to. And all I do is I leave them either a text. I try to do a voice text. I don't ask for anything. I just say, hey, I thought about you, just reaching out. And I just want to make sure that you're doing okay. And if you want to, hit me up, that's great. But I was thinking about you. And that's all I do. And what that's done is, and that's not even, at first when I was doing it, I was like, am I doing that for me or for them? Because I did get a sense of peace and happiness with them returning that message without asking for anything. But I realized it's like, I don't even care if they respond or not, because then it becomes all about me. I want it to be more about them. I want to give, like I said, give the seed, plant it, and walk away. You'd be surprised at how many people respond with, and sometimes they don't even respond. I'll get a message from someone and it's a week later. They're like, Julian, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, but I actually am not doing that well. And I need someone to brighten my day, and that brightened my day because I didn't think anybody was thinking about me. And that's been happening for a while. Those type of things are impactful. And I think that that's the part of just giving back and go almost like sort of piggybacking off of my thought process between profit and nonprofit is I just want to help people. And that's authentically what I want to do. And that doesn't mean I don't want to make money. Don't get me wrong. But that's the whole picture of the relationship. So relationship it's either 1 or 2 at the top because it's big.
Thank you so much for bringing that up in the way that you did, because it is so huge in that mind. And I think about, like, last night I sent the same text to 2 of my friends and just told them, I've been thinking about you, praying for you. And every day I say, I have my prayer written here. Dear Lord, give me the wisdom to do the things you put me on this earth to do in a way that pleases you and serves others. Yeah. And one of the things that you hit on there that I love is you're working on relationships. And you said it should come naturally, but the reality is it doesn't, right? It doesn't, because we are beings that think about ourselves, and we get up. And you said, one of the things that you said is, I didn't know if I was doing it for me or if I was doing it for them. Well, the ultimate goal is to do it for them. Otherwise you wouldn't call them, right? But it's okay when you serve others to feel good about serving others, right? Because I think that's, God put that in us, like, yes. The greatest joy that we can have is to serve others.
Yes.
You know, and when we're able to do that, then the joy comes and we feel good, and that makes us want to do it
More.
again, right?
Yes, I love that.
That's what good. So yeah, part of it is, we're doing it for ourselves so we can feel the joy of doing it. But, and maybe you can talk about this a little bit more, because the key that I saw in what you're saying is I purposely take time out to make sure that I'm working on being better at relationship, because I realize how important it is. And I love the Fab Fridays. Are there anything else or things that you specifically do to make sure? Because there's things that I do with my wife, that I say every week I got to make sure I'm doing with my wife. Every week I do. I have 8 children and now up to 16 grandkids, as my son's married somebody else. And think about how do I make sure that those relationships are good, or other relationships? What are some of the things that you do other than just the Fab? I love the Fab Five. But what else are you, with that thought process, what else are you doing?
Well, so I have a stepson that is 28. My daughter, and I had mentioned this, she's up at the University of Colorado. Then my girlfriend, her and I live together. But it's you have to make an effort and not think about you. And I know this could be controversial, because some people you need to think about yourself first. And I get that piece. I think it's about context when you say that, because I think if you're thinking about others and you're thinking about what you do, then you have to make an effort to do that. And some of the things are, thinking about think of it as removing yourself and putting yourself in those other people's shoes. So as an example, if it's my girlfriend, I have to understand sort of what her love language is. So meaning what makes her, just because I might think, oh, if I wash these dishes, it's going to make her happy. But I need to understand what makes her happy and what makes her move. So if I know those top 3 things, then I would do something. Like I know she likes flowers. So then I try to make sure it's not on a day that you're supposed to give flowers, like Valentine's Day, but something where it's like, hey, I was just thinking about you, and I know your favorite color is yellow, so I got you these yellow roses. And I won't even say anything. I'll just put them on the table and walk away. And then she'll see, it may be 2 days later. At one time it was like a day and a half later. She's like, where'd these come from? And that was just something that she liked. Even my kids, making sure that I tell them that I love them. And that's important too, even if, sometimes I'll say, and I don't like, as an example, I sent something to my daughter 3 days in a row. How are you? And I won't go into this, but she got a concussion while she was in London the last 10 days. So I was reaching out. She didn't respond for 3 straight days. And then she responded the 4th day saying, hey, I'm back and I'm sorry, my phone was broke. I'm like, really? You were on social media.
Your friend's phone was broke too, right?
Yeah, exactly. I know it wasn't broke. But instead of me getting upset and angry and, to keep the relationship, I could easily have that in me, which I used to have in me is, well, she's not going to, and it could have been, minus my daughter, I'm her dad. But if it's anyone that did the same thing, it's, you know what? Why am I going to waste my time talking to someone that doesn't want to talk to me? Being my daughter is something different. So today I just text her like, I love you. And I just left it at that. And that was it. So that she knows based on her actions, I'm not going to follow suit, because I don't want to follow suit on negative actions. I want to follow suit on positiveness. So, and the one thing that made me think of why, because when I thought, and this is more on the faith side, when I thought about, would God do that to me? Because I know I'm not perfect in the things that I do, and I could do. And if I'm sinning and I keep doing the same sin, and then I come back to him, he's going to receive me still. So if I want to be godlike, then I need to act as if and do some of the same. So that's what made me say, in my mind, instead of doing the human thing, which would be, you did that unto me, then I'm going to do it back to you. I'm going to take the better way out and stay positive and lead by example. And that's what I try to do. And that's how I build the relationships and continue those relationships. And I have longstanding relationships because of that, because I am open to constructive criticism. I listen, but I also will give feedback. So those are some of the examples that with my kids, making sure I text them consistently and my girlfriend, and, doing the things that I have to understand what she likes and understand what moves them. It's not always about me.
I love the maturity in that. And I'm sure 20 years ago, it probably wasn't the same.
I know. You're right. It wasn't.
I know for me, the same thing. But I love what you said, where you said, where the controversy of taking care of yourself first. And what it reminded me of is like when you get on the plane and they say, if the masks drop, put yours on first before you put it on to your kids or whatever, because you might not be able to do that. And so if the motive is right, and you start thinking about the motive, if the motive is to ultimately serve others, you have to think about yourself and getting yourself taken care of before you put the mask on somebody else, right? It's not, I'm just going to put the mask on and then, no, well, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So if that's what it is, then we have to get our ducks in a row. We have to work on our own identity. We have to do our own personal development. We have to do our own, thought process, go to the barbershop meetings with the community that we're in so we can work on us, right, in order to serve others the best way that we possibly can. Because if we're not in the right space to serve others, then we're worthless to them. If we're showing up as somebody who can't, give, if all I'm showing up as a person who can take, which is all of us at some point, right? At some point we need to show up. Hey, I'm broken. It's not working. I need your help. And we all need that. But if there's nobody to show up to because the rest of us haven't worked on ourselves, then we can't be in that community to help each other, right?
I'll add to that, because when I look at myself and I already know, I'll say I love that that you had that prayer, because I think that in today's society, I call it religion versus spiritual, and I do struggle a little bit. Me and my mom always have these great conversations with the faith piece, is with organized religion, and I believe in the Bible because that's what I was brought up in, that foundation. But I think that, and I'll just say this, that I think sometimes we get caught up into following man instead of following God. And so that's why when you start hearing about the T.D. Jakes and Creflo Dollars and Joel Osteens and all that, and when they fall, then everybody gets so upset. They start pointing the finger or whatever. And it's like, they're just giving the message. Yeah. Nothing's changed. The nothing's changed. They're giving the message. They may be blessed in being able to receive the Spirit to give a different understanding of it, but it's still there. So I think that when you start looking at it from that perspective on keeping your eyes on yourself. I almost lost my train of thought because you had said something that made me think about the spirituality piece of what you were talking about. And I sort of missed that at the end. I apologize for that. But still, from that perspective, when you're looking at what you said about wisdom, and when you say the right prayer, is saying it as it builds you up. And that's when you have to take care of yourself, not praying about all the material things that you might want, or winning a football game or winning something. It's that prayer that you said. And I think that's powerful, because all I do the same prayer, is praying for me to be a light onto others and help me in my walk from a confidence perspective, help me to uplift people through wisdom. Oh, and I know what I was going to say. It was more around what I see in me when if I have when I say a bad night, it wouldn't be a bad night. It could be a party. And let's just say, I know I need to do something the next day. I think the bigger picture is God is allowing me to make my own decisions. And then he shows you in a different light that, hey, I'm going to give you all that you asked for, but if you get in your own way, I can't help you. So if you drink and you are hungover and you want to be successful at a event that you need to speak at, and now you find that you are foggy, or you mess up, or you forget a meeting or whatever, and you think things are supposed to go your way, I'm presenting it. That's when you got to look and reflect on yourself, on what are you doing in your walk to make sure that you're not blaming God for the things that are actually put in place for you to be successful. That's actually you doing that. And I think that's why a lot of people go against God and against religion, is because they want to blame God for everything. And I think it's a matter of, he gives you free will. You got to look at yourself first before you start pointing the finger on why you can't be blessed or why you're not doing that. And the biggest one is, I think we look at some of the easy sins, stealing, lying, all that. I think it's the emotional, mental sins are the most powerful that we don't pay attention to. And that's pride. Those are the things of, vengeance, things that we, ego, all that stuff those are the ones that get, I think, to be honest, Brian, those are the ones that get in our way as a Black culture, as we start being successful. And that's why sometimes I have to say that prayer is, I don't want too much money because I'll forget you. And I don't want too little money because I will resent you. So I want God to keep me right here. Now, I know as a human flesh that I'm not turning, it's going to be hard for me. Someone says, here's $1 million. I'll be hard to turn that down. But what I know that from a human perspective and a fleshly perspective, that's what I would pray about, that you can help me in those thoughts, because up here is powerful and it can take you in all different directions. That's where the mental health, life skills, and if you've gone through it, that's where we can give back as Black men, as we've learned our plight. We learn from each other. And then if you have a platform that you can be able to reach out to the community, and that's where I didn't have before. I shouldn't say that. I think I had a platform and no one told me that I could use my platform the way I can use that. And I think that's why I started Hayward Forward too, is because, and my buddy told me this is the people I surround myself with telling me the right things. Like, Julian, there's not a lot of people that have won a national championship and experienced what you have. And for you to be able to use that platform to be able to have discussions, that's a door opener. Immediately, you can get it in the door. Now, you might not say all the right things, and it may be a one-off, but it at least gets you in the front door to be able to speak and talk, to gain more opportunity for whatever you want in your strategy as far as a business and as an individual and a person. So that's, I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, and if I were to speak into some of what you said, I would say, God, because you are a child of God, because you have the right mindset around what God is asking you to do, he's not going to give you that $1 million until you can handle it, right?
Yes.
Because he knows you can handle it. And then once you can, if it shows up, you're going to do the right thing because you've already processed, this is the person that I want to be. And at the same time, Satan will give somebody $1 million too who's not going to process it right, not do it right.
Yes.
Because they're not a child of God and they're not doing the right things. And so, I don't think you ever have to worry about, doing the right thing as you build, as this grows, and we can help you build your business and grow your business. I want to just kind of pivot really quick to health because, one of the things that plights us as Black men is this life expectancy of 72, 73, because of the things we put in our body and the things that we do, the mental health that we go through, that takes away from our life as well. What are some of the things that you do to maintain not only a healthy physical body, but a healthy spirit at the same time?
So I it's funny because, and just so you know, my walk with the Lord has changed me, and it hasn't been all my life. I know I have a foundation, but I would say more recently, and that's why I would say that if you build that foundation, even if you walk away, it'll come back. He's always there. So my foundation has always been that. So I would say probably about 2.5 months ago, I said I need to change something in my life, and I just started. You picked up your book, and I started reading a devotional in the morning. So, and through that, I think mine's right here. It's called Promises from God's Word for Men, and it's like in the mornings, 15 minutes, and it's one thing per day. And one of them was about discipline, and I realized that I wasn't being disciplined, so I added that in my life. to be disciplined in that walk minimally every day. So I don't want it to be, oh, it's Sunday, I need to go to church. I want it to be constantly. And when I say constantly, it's not like always 100%, but it means, when I'm driving in the car, there's a time for me to reflect and think about things. And those are the times where and I read that in one of the devotion, be quiet with the Lord, and, when you start doing that, and I'm learning stuff that I'm like, oh, I can just ask him for that. And that's okay. It's like, yes, when you pray, you pray in this way. So that's why your prayer resonated with me, because that was also in my book. So I was like, oh, that's awesome. But in regards to that, when I use the word discipline, that's also with your health.
Okay.
And our culture, unfortunately, especially if you're from the South, and that's also from a generation, we eat poorly. And it's so good, though. It is so good. Whether you're eating, my mom was from Mississippi, and chitlins and red beans and rice, and like all, you can just start naming it, greens and all of that. But I think we get into those generational bad habits and lack of knowledge, not understanding what we're putting in affects our mind and our body. And obviously there would be a piece of Hayward Forward I'd love to do, create content around how to eat healthy. And I'm sort of doing that and piecing that together also. But it's educating us. And it's funny because we were at the barbershop talk last night, and Al was one of the moderators, and they had some food, and he mentioned it, that there was a big bowl of salad, but there was a lot of Popeye's chicken.
Yeah.
And he even said, he's like, I know we're talking about being healthy, and it's like, yeah. So those are the things you got to get in a cadence. You got to be, and I would tell this to the group as men, it's like, we have to be disciplined. And I'm going to throw this out and I'll go back to health, is when we're disciplined, we start with ourselves. And one thing that as a Black culture, we're not really disciplined in. And I'm saying this because I was late yesterday, but I did call Kareem. My phone went out, but I called Kareem's his wife, and said, I'm going to be 15 minutes late. I was only 8 minutes late. But we're not disciplined this is just, don't use this as the specific, this is as a whole. You can plug and play this.
Yeah.
This. But we're not disciplined as a culture, because as a culture, I know that we're told that we're always late. We'll be late to our own funeral. And I know that there was like 6 or 7 guys that came in late. And I think that if you think about it, and I was one of them, but if you think about it, it's because we think that's okay, or that's what we've been taught, or that's what we see, or we're not disciplined. We're not being disciplined and saying, hey, you need to be 5 minutes early if you think you're going to be late. And we know things come up. It's just that's a mindset in general. Yeah. So so use that same plug and play. Now you go to health, mindset. What are you used to? If you're so used to do, so what I've done is I've changed that habit. So I actually have done it for so long, Brian, that my body craves vegetables because I've done it for so long.
That's awesome.
So if I eat a hamburger or a steak or something, or I eat something, I don't like eating sugar, and I don't like it because I don't drink soda, So it's also, over time, you've got to get in a place where you can do that for a long period of time. Surround yourself with people that are also helping you. That's and so someone, if you're having a bad day and you want that, donut, why the reason I don't eat donuts? Because I saw someone squeeze a donut and all the oil that came out of it.
Woo! Yes.
In a cup.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, and understanding the effect. So it's a combination of the knowledge, where we came from a foundation, and understanding, if we're going to keep our generations healthy, let's understand how to put the right things in our body. And that's the same thing. So if you know that you do that from a fleshly perspective, and you mentioned this, you do the same thing with your spirit. What are you putting in growing your spirit? Because just because you're a 50-year-old man doesn't mean your spirit has grown accordingly, because you can still be 50 and be in your spirit walk your a baby. And that's okay if you're looking to continue to grow.
Yeah.
Some people get stuck. Me and my mom talk about it all the time. And it's like, that's the only thing about being careful with the organized church is once we get into rituals and doing the same thing, over time, it moves the ability to receive what we should be receiving. And I'm not pushing away church in the community by any means. I know that there's, sometimes I listen to Dr. Umar. I don't know if you listen to him on podcasts, and sometimes he's very against the church. And I shouldn't say very against, but he has some things to say about that. Some of them I can understand why he thinks that way, but I think it's more productive to be more positive about the church. And it's okay to identify certain things that they can work on, just like us as humans. But I think he comes across a little bit more condemning than I would come across more like, no, I get what you're saying, but keep your eyes off of man, again, the men or women that are in the influencers, and just focus on you and the individual and the spirit. And I think that God will open your eyes to be able to say it in the way that people can receive it. Because sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you're saying and how you're conveying it, especially if you're a leader in the community.
Yeah, and I think God has called us to relationship, not to religion. And so religion is man-made, right?
Yes.
So it has man-made flaws and everything else that go into it. But the relationship, which is important. And so the building itself and the people that are there, if it's there for relationship, it's a great place to be. If it's there for, the religion part of it that we've come up with, then
totally agree.
Yeah. And so the one phrase that I'll kind of end with is, are you living to eat? Or are you eating to live? And so, when you can get to the point where you're just eating to live because of all the things and nutrients put in your body so that you can go serve others, then it changes the way you eat. If you're, and people tell you I'm a foodie, and I got to go try all these different things. Well, Popeyes is not a foodie spot, right? Popeyes is just some good chicken that tastes good, but it's not because you're a connoisseur. And our taste, the things that we taste. So it's just important. Today I do a 3-mile walk, and literally I have not ran or jogged in at least 10 years because I'm 59 years old. My body's old, right? It hurts. But I had to pee today, and I actually jogged for about 100 meters. And wait, I can jog 100 meters? I had no idea. But just knowing that I can continue to grow, I continue to go to the gym. It's important to me now, way more than it was the last 20 years, to make sure that my body works really well, so that I can serve others. And then, so I'm thinking about myself, right? Like you said before, in order so that I can be here, because I don't want to, literally that's 12 years from now, right? Or 13 years that I'm 73. And then that's could be the end of my life expectancy. Somebody put a ruler in front of me the other day, and they stretched out the ruler, and it started at 1, and they said go to life expectancy was 72. So I'm here 72 inches. Then they said grab how old you are. And I grabbed here, right? And I'm going, oh my God, this much here has been I've already done, and this is what I got left. So there's a perspective that goes on.
I like that.
Yeah. And Julian, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to let you talk. I'm going to give you some last thoughts here. Okay. But we're over at an hour already, so we have been talking.
That was fast. That was good.
Please, what I want you to do is whatever final thoughts, whatever things that may take the next 3 or 4 or 5 minutes, and just tell us what it is that you want to make sure that is conveyed as we end our time together.
Yeah, I was going to end with this, and this is a question, and I don't. It's weird because I don't know if I know the answer, but I would want people to think about and come up with a rebuttal to this thought. Is there something that you can get in abundance and it's okay? So, and what I mean by that is almost anything that you do in abundance. And maybe you can come up with something quick. I don't know, but it's something for you to think about too, Brian, that doesn't affect you negatively. So if you eat too much of anything, it's going to affect you negatively. It doesn't matter what it is. If you take too much if you drink too much water, anything, like if you, whatever, but the one thing that you can get in abundance that won't affect you negatively is peace. So if you have peace and abundance, you can have that. You're never, so
Take too much.
yeah. So you could argue, you could say, well, happiness in abundance. I was like, yeah, but then you got to tell me what makes you happy. So then if you tell me what makes you happy, all I can say is, if I take that away, or if something happens, like if you say hiking, I can hike all day. That makes me happy. But if you hike all day, but as you get old, all of a sudden now you hurt your knee, you can't hike anymore. So that takes that away. Yeah. But the bigger picture is, and I'll leave you with this, is when people say they're happy, I always say that I would prefer to be at peace than to be happy. Because if I'm at peace, happiness, I think, is a product of being at peace. Because I can go drink two margaritas and I can be happy for that hour. But then afterwards, reality still comes back and hits me. But if I'm at peace, my mom could die tomorrow. I'm going to be sad, but I'm going to be at peace. Because I already know, based on where she's at or whatever, I'm in peace with myself. I'm going to be sad that she's gone. But just through our relationship, I'll still be at peace. It doesn't mean you can't be emotional a little bit. It just means that you're in a place where you're good with yourself, and you're not worried about what other people think, that it distracts you from being who you are, and you're authentic. And that's the peace that I want to have and be able to give and let people know, that don't chase the stuff that's going to go away or that's there for the moment, because peace will be there all the time if you understand how to remove the things that are taking you away from being at peace.
What a good word. I am so glad you ended with that, because even when you first said that, I thought of, serving others. But that can even be in abundance too much, where you've burned yourself out. Yes. And now you're not good to anybody because you did it too much. I mean, yes. I think there's a bigger bucket to be able to do that with, but at some point, peace is amazing.
Yeah, and I thought about that. That's the reason why. And there may be something that somebody comes up with, and I'm glad you thought deeper, because I think I call them linear thinkers. They just think of the first thing that comes to their mind that makes them happy. And because there's a lot of stuff that you come up with, but I could always come back to say, and you just said it, but over time, something's going to happen and take that away. Yeah. But if you understand how to get that peace and no one can take that away from you, then you can have an abundance of that, and you're going to be good no matter what. But so that's the piece that. But if you can think of something, Brian, let me know, because I'll
put it in. If you guys in the comments and the chats here, go ahead and put it in if you guys think of stuff, and we will revisit it. And so, okay, Julian, I just thank you for taking the time out today to being on this. It has been delightful and wonderful experience for me. I think I get more out of these conversations than everybody else, because I get to do them with everybody. But, the alignment that you have, and I hope that maybe in a year or so we'll come back and we'll revisit and see where, the Hayward Forward is going, and anything that we can do to help support that, to help you move forward, help you grow. We want to do that here at the Journey to Freedom universe is about community. It's about making sure that we, specifically, as Black men, have some outlets and have some places that we can go. I love the barbershop. I hope that we can recreate some of that. And again, it has been wonderful to have you on. I've appreciated it. If there's anything, like you said, that we need that we can do to help you, we appreciate it. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Right. Well, thanks for your time, Brian. I had a great time. I love the conversation, and anything I can do to help support you as well. I know you had some things you sent in that email. I'm willing to help and to spread the word about your podcast. I've already told a few people I was going to do a podcast. They were asking about it, so whatever I can do to help spread it, I will do so.
I love it. Thank you. Well, you guys have a great day. Thank you for being part of another episode of Journey to Freedom, and we will talk to you on the next one. Have a great day.
Thank you.